I can't believe that. I just watched three horror movies on the span of 1 week. And I'm talking about, the new ones. I just wanted to get things out of the way this weekend, so I decided to catch up on the latest Blumhouse horror movie, that is Lee Cronin's The Mummy. I gotta be honest that I almost never knew that movie was existing. I barely I saw any trailers when I went to the movie theaters, and when I heard the existence about this movie, is more kind of like a passing through notice, and then I saw the trailer and I thought it was, well, okay. I know that there was a Dracula movie that came out this year. I haven't seen it. I know that there was the bride is technically Frankenstein, but that one I heard stuff about it, but I'm still curious that I want to watch it once I can get it from the library. And now we got The Mummy, which apparently little by little Blumhouse is trying to give kind of like a different spin to the Universal classic horror monsters. As far as I can remember, it was with the Invisible Woman. I thought it was fine. The Wolfman was very boring and very forgettable. I even forgot how it was. And now there's The Mummy, in which, truth to be told, The Mummy is probably one of my kind of like the most forgettable that I keep forgetting it exists of all the Universal monsters or the classic monsters. It kind of like it doesn't scare me much, but I will say that I haven't seen the original. I gotta admit that I haven't seen the original. I know that it had Boris Karloff, and it became kind of like an icon. Probably I'm gonna watch it sometime. But I did watch The Mummy with Brendan Fraser, and also The Mummy Returns, and I gotta admit that as a youngster, I really had kind of like a kick and really enjoyed those movies, and I think that I will rewatch it one of these days, and I can tell that it is kind of like a time it is a time capsule of its era. And of course Brendan Fraser was kind of like the hottest guy on that day and age. I haven't seen, of course, The Scorpion King. That's the one I skip. And of course, let's all remember that, of course, there was the one that has Tom Cruise that wanted to kickstart a cinematic universe with the dark universe, the first and only dark cinematic universe that they tried so hard. That one was garbage. I remember hating that movie when the first time I seen it. But now we got this one, Lee Cronin's The Mummy. For those who doesn't know, Lee Cronin is a horror director. I don't know him much except that he directed the last Evil Dead movie, Evil Dead Rises. So I had something to do with my appointment today, but then I thought that, well, I finished my appointments quickly, so maybe I'll go watch a movie. Lee Cronin's The Mummy. I've been hearing stuff about it, some positive, some negatives, but I go and decided to make my own decision. And right at the get-go, I will tell you that I had fun with this movie. But the more I think about it, I can see some of the rocky hurdles that this movie has. I might think that I can pass this movie as something to watch, although it does suffer some of the stuff that Blumhouse usually you usually stumble upon. Although it's not kind of like a so bad it's funny kind of Blumhouse in which I kind of get a lot of guilty pleasures on that kind of thing. Or it's not also so bad is it's so bad it is unwatchable kind of thing, or it's not even kind of like annoying or something like that. I will say that it kind of goes in the middle of the road, and depending on the mood that you get, or if you can bypass some of this stuff, you could probably pass this by saying that it's probably one of the better Blumhouse movies that you could get, but not exactly by a long shot, because that a lot of things have done stuff right, but then you're gonna notice some oddities or anomalies. If I want to play out again, I'm still on Exit 8 kind of vibe. It is. It's just it. It will. I would just say that it's pretty much kind of like a B plus or B kind of movie, or a C plus kind of movie. It will depend on how you look at it. So let's start out. The movie it's about this family who the father is a documentarist. And they live in Cairo, Egypt. They're about to move to New York in Albuquerque, the place where Bugs Bunny tries to go, until one day the eldest daughter, when she was very small at the time, and she was a Girl Scout and all that stuff, they kind of realized that she was making contact with some stranger, and then that stranger kidnaps her, and then disappeared for 8 years. That is until suddenly somewhere in Cairo a plane crashes, and they find this big, kind of like this big coffin made of rock, although it kind of looks like a monolith. And inside they find the daughter, but the daughter is kind of like, she wakes up and she's mangled, the skin is really brownish and all this stuff, and the family finally get her back. But unfortunately, she's not exactly the same. They find it because to connect it to the movie's title, she looks a little bit like how you look when you get mummified. Almost like when in Japan, when they mummified, when those monks decide to go into mummification, when they decide to meditate until they shrivel or something like that. It's a big story that I'm not gonna go too much into detail. You'll see her very withered. The nails are long, and she has a lot of cuts. And unfortunately, she begins to act kind of like erratic. A little that they don't know is that there's something more about this character. For the most part, I will say that the family themselves are. They're kind of both dumb, but they're not kind of like unlikable in a way. Mostly it kind of centers around the kind of like the father who after he basically feels responsible that he couldn't rescue his daughter, and after he recovered her, he's kind of like the only one of the few characters who actually tries to find some kind of answers, in which he's like, what happened with her and all this stuff. But then we got the mother, who I think she was kind of like the dumbest of them all, because I know that she was trying to cope with that. They finally found a daughter, and they're gonna try her best, to bring her back to society, and by nursing her, nurture her, and they did. Although it kind of shows a lot of signs that this kid doesn't belong in a house. It actually belongs to a psych ward, and they make notice of that. But it was like, no, she needs love, family, and all this stuff. Woman, I'm sorry. I know sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes you need to be a 24/7 observation, because this is technically a character who for the first minute that they find her, she's just screaming, mutilating herself, and even hurting others. I'll get to that a little bit into more detail, but so sometimes these obvious decisions they just do it kind of like for the sake of the movie. There's also the kind of like the brother who he starts out as a child who kind of have this sibling fight with the girl that disappeared. Her name is Katie, just in case. And then he grows up to be, the teenager. There's also the youngest daughter who she had to lose teeth, and okay, the police is coming. No, it happens always. You're getting used to it. One of the things that I do want to criticize, especially on Blumhouse, is that apparently there's this pattern in which they really try so hard on how children act, because they really try hard on making that the children looks so pretty and so cute, and they kind of have kind of like this pretty tad kind of acting. That happens a lot, especially on little girls, and this movie is no exception. And this is weird, considering that Lee Cronin is also, I know that he is competent, and this movie basically falls into that. There's also the grandmother who she's very religious. She's very religious, and considering her position of the character, I knew how she was gonna end up, especially because that she's the most religious of all the characters, and she for the most part of the movie she's doing grandma stuff and talking like grandma, and also talking and making insane prayers in Spanish. in Spanish. And probably I will say that there's also the policewoman from Cairo. What was it? Let me see something about her. It's not here now. Oh yeah, she's played by Ma Kalamawi. That's the name of the actress. And she is she being the policewoman, the detective. She is the best character in this movie, because when she's the one who is trying her best, to find out what happened, even helping the father in long distances, to trying to pinpoint what's going on, what she finds, and what he finds. They keep communicating each other, and when the investigation goes into full motion, she really is a badass. Yeah, she really makes the shots and tries her best, to solve the case, because it's not just about finding the victim, but also trying to find out who done it, and when things go kind of like deeper, man. And this is where I also talk about Katie, the girl who was kidnapped, in which then, I'm trying to not spoil too much, something happened to her in which they find her mummified, and for the most part, she's a good actress. Well, not exactly when she was a little child, but that's what they always try to say, that, well, you gotta be a little bit more easy on children acting. But here is where a little bit this movie kind of downplays in itself, because for a movie called The Mummy, it doesn't feel much like you're watching a mummy, except that the only thing that links them is that it comes from Egypt. That's it. Sometimes you see sand here and there, or there's scorpions involved, and well, for the sake of argument, there is, of course, she is basically covered also with unseen bandages, which that's basically one of the things that the mummy is notable is the bandages, and all this Egyptian thing. Although I think that much like the Brendan Fraser movie, they always saying that mummies have kind of like magical powers and all this stuff, but here is where it gets a little bit off. Is that when the mummy Katie starts acting creepy, it more feels like she's turned into the Deadite from the Evil Dead. Yeah. And sometimes it goes even saying some one-liners, or kind of becomes kind of like corny, and even some of these executions kind of becomes a little bit unintentionally funny. Like you're watching, and for the most part, I feel like I'm watching the Evil Dead more than the Mummy. Because it really kind of the humor. It really feels like a Sam Raimi movie, and considering that the guy really made Evil Dead Rises, so it kind of, you can tell kind of like that tone that you get. Like for example, there's a moment in which Katie headbutts one of the characters, like boom. And I don't know, the way the music and the execution it goes, it just kind of made me giggle instead of being scared. Or sometimes when it kind of begins saying that lines like where like welcome to the family or something like that, or your feet taste good, or sometimes like being dead is not so bad. This character really sounds like she's supposed to be battling Bruce Campbell. Oh, bless your soul, Bruce Campbell. No, he's not dead. He's going through something about his health, but I still respect him as an actor. But yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to say. There are some other characters like there, there's the intro in which we see that family, and we see kind of like this woman who she's pretty much very, very no nonsense. And although I gotta admit, yeah, that intro was actually effective and all this stuff. This brings me a little bit with the cinematography, that because this feels like an Evil Dead movie, of course that it has all the staples, like the gross out humor, like vomiting, or sometimes very gory stuff. Like for example, I'm not gonna lie, I did cringe a little bit when a scene that has to do with toenails, and when it happened, it kind of brought me back when one of my toenails had to be removed because some wood landed on my toe, and it got purple, and then my good neighbor, he picked up some pliers, and then that part made me cringe. Although there are some other kind of like gross out humors, and the gore effects are fine. Sometimes they get some people say that it kind of goes too far in some places, and I get it. I didn't have much of a problem, but except when, like I said, when it turns kind of like Evil Dead thing, especially when there's a scene in which blood is splattered on some devil eggs, and then someone eats it. That's really, gross out humor for the sake of gross out humor, because, well, the guy is a very Evil Dead kind of guy. This is something that I am willing to let that pass. Although, some of the effects are fine. Although some noticeable on the CGI, especially with the CGI coyotes that they showcase. Not exactly. They don't exactly overstay its welcome in order to be so noticeable. But yeah, there's something about it. That's not much I have to say. So yeah, that's pretty much I have to say about this. Although but I will say that mostly the pacing is fine, even though there is a movie about 2 hours. I gotta say that even despite the faults that this movie has, I didn't feel bored. I was actually mesmerized and wanted to see about it. Although I did saw after the movie ended, I did hear out the Brad Jones review of it, and honestly, one thing that I do agree with him is that the plot kind of sounds like a better version of The Exorcist Believer, and that terrible Exorcist movie that came out what was it, 2 years ago? And now that when I begin to put the pieces together, it's like, you're right. It's basically feel like a possession movie more than a mummy movie, and it does follow a little bit too close to the Exorcist more than anything, especially Believer. I mean, for like both movies, they start off with a kidnapping, then pass some time, and then instead of doing the appropriate thing, like for example, keeping the police keeping a watch on the victim, then that's the family decides to take care of it. So, but I will say that at least the Lee Cronin's The Mummy is better written than Believer, and doesn't try out this whole BS to diminish the older movie or something like that. That's the curiosity that I can give to this one. What else I can say? Yeah, like I said, it really has some kind of like dumb moment. Not instead of the family trying to instead of sending this kid to a psych ward, they decide to take care of it for the sake of a plot, or kind of like calling some help, or an exorcist. Also, it is. I will say that things. I will say that at least the movie also has some good atmosphere, and the music is actually pretty good, and it just kind of is a shame that it kind of diminishes itself with some dumb things. But now that I think about it, that's technically also one of the strengths of the Evil Dead, is that as corny or unintentionally hilarious it gets, some of the things, depending on how you take it, it's gonna scare up some folks. Like for example, here's something that is very noticeable that I have kind of like with the audience. Although the audience was technically pretty quiet, except that next to me, some guy, he decides to bring his, I think, 12-year-old to this R-rated movie, and the kid was pretty much a mixture between confused and was like, why does this happen? Why does this happen? The father's like, hey, don't worry, just watch, and all that stuff. And then comes kind of like a scene that is so gory that that I just look at the kid for a while, and the kid was like not into it, and the father at least at least he had the decency to cover his eyes to help him say "don't look" and all that stuff. I don't know if this is technically a good father or a reckless father, because why a 12-year-old kid will be allowed to watch that movie. But this is mostly on the movie theater thing. Although, I mean that. Why I'm complaining? I watched South Park since I was 14, and South Park is mostly for 18 years old older. That's the biggest thing that I noticed with it. And yeah, the ending kind of feels kind of like again, kind of unintentionally funny, and it's and in a way satisfied. So overall, I will say that I I did enjoy this movie fine. I'll say. The more I think about it, I can find some inconsistencies on the plot or some of the dumb moments, but that doesn't diminish that I wasn't bored with it. I was actually really hooked because in a way, I did kind of care about the characters. The character could have been worse. And also, we got the detective who was a badass, and that was kind of like the best part of the movie. And even though it feels more like an Exorcist movie than a Mummy movie, honestly, I will say that yeah, I think that this movie could have benefit if they could make a new title that doesn't sound like the Mummy and all this stuff. But who knows? It could be worse. It could be part of, well, some dark universe with Tom Cruise, and you know where this goes. So yeah, I'll say that you can like or dislike this movie but this Mummy. Pretty much really much like an Evil Dead that really needed Bruce Campbell to save the day.